Hey guys, welcome to That Geek Reviews. So, there's this great new invention I was never aware of called Geek Week. Perfect! I thought it was considered Geek Week to be the first week of May because that's when you have May the 4th be with you. So, I just assumed, but I'm out of the loop. Apparently, I'm not a true geek. Figured today I would talk a little bit about my favorites, favorite shows, etc. I'm kind of mainly focusing on three. Doctor Who, which, as you guys can see, it's one of my favorites. Star Trek, which, as you can see, is one of my favorites. And Star Wars, which Star Wars is one of those things where everybody loves it, and it's amazing, but I've just seen it so many times. And I just want people to stop talking about it because they need to, focus in on something else. Because you have Star Wars is a franchise in which most people of any generation could get into because you had the prequels, you have the Clone Wars, you have Lego Star Wars, you have the originals are obviously the originals. I mean, the originals are perfect. But now, should the franchise live on, or should it just die off? Is a controversial question we will answer later on. So mainly Doctor Who, my friend got me into about 2 years ago. Just as Series 5 had ended, I started watching. I started with Series 1 with Christopher Eccleston, and I worked my way to the end of Series 4, finishing with the end of Time, in which David Tennant regenerates. I didn't watch Series 5 after that right away. I actually waited. Basically, what I did was I watched up to Series 4, and then I said, oh, wait, I didn't realize they were classics. So I started watching a couple of the classics, and around that time, I had started watching Star Trek a little earlier. So I really enjoy only the original Star Trek for me. I hadn't really ever gotten into any of the newer series at this time, or still haven't really. I'm working on it. And I have really got a feel, and I got a love, and I just wanted some, older sci-fi, late 60s, early 70s sci-fi. And when I started watching the classic Doctor Who, I started with Tom Baker was my first one, as he's, was the biggest one and on the longest tenure. And I didn't like him at first, to be truthful. I actually hated it. So I stopped watching the classics and I rewatched series 1 through 4 again. And I loved it. I ended up buying. I'm working on it. I have seasons 3 and 4. 4 is my favorite of all of them. I love it. But then I gave it another shot. I actually went back and I watched Spearhead from Space, which was Jon Pertwee, the third Doctor's first serial in 1970, and I fell in love instantly. I was like, this is the Doctor I've wanted. This is the Doctor that I just love this Doctor. I bought a couple. I'm working on my classic collection, but I have Planet of the Spiders, which is his last serial. I don't know why I bought this one. It was on sale, so I bought this one first. And then I have Inferno, which is his most famous. People usually think Jon Pertwee's serial, Inferno, big one. I actually have only watched half of it. I got it a couple weeks ago, and I've just been away. So I'll be finishing that, so I'll let you all know how that is. I actually, I started on Netflixed another Tom Baker serial, and I started to like him a little more. I bought the Key of Time collection, which has 6 different serials. It has the Rebus Operation, the Pirate Planet, the Stones of Blood, the Androids of Tara, Power of Kroll, and the Armageddon Factor. It has Romana 1. Mary Tam comes into the show in the Rebus Operation, and then ends up regenerating to Romana 2 in the Armageddon Factor into Lalla Ward. Lalla Ward is one of my favorite classic companions. Romana 2. Her and Tom Baker mesh so well in the show together, especially in The City of Death, which was an old serial with Tom Baker. If you watch that, they just get along so well. They actually married, but Tom Baker was not the best husband, so they didn't last long. But great. I love it. I actually fell in love with Tom Baker. But then I kind of skipped over Peter Davison. I watched a couple of him and was like, he's okay. I later took more of a liking for him afterwards, but at the time, and I watched Colin Baker because a lot of people did not like him, the 6th Doctor. Now I fell in love instantly. He is my second favorite Doctor. I like Pertwee's my favorite, the third Doctor, then Colin Baker, the sixth, then David Tennant, the 10th. I love all of the Doctors except for the 11th, which I'll talk about later on. Maybe in a different video because it's a long rant. Colin Baker is me to a T. He's got the flat out the bitchy persona. He's got, the condescending, yet caring and sensitive, yet aggressive personality that I have. I think he's amazing. I loved his Doctor. I think it's a shame what happened, and I definitely wish that there could be more done with him. However, if you see him now, they're not going to do too much. He's done a lot of audio plays, and there's been a lot of books with him, though, so that's good. He did stay involved. He never, left the show. He always wanted to stay involved in it, so I am glad that he had, he didn't develop, he doesn't abhor the show. And, it was obviously the production team at the time decided to take an 18-month hiatus. It killed his career as the Doctor. And a lot of people don't like him and don't give him the credit he deserves. And the 7th Doctor, I actually haven't gotten too much into. I didn't like him. And then I watched The Hobbit, and Sylvester McCoy, who played the 7th Doctor, played Radagast the Brown. And I kind of was like, oh, he's funny in this. Then I went back and I watched a couple scenes from a few episodes. And I was like, oh, he's good. I like him. He's very dramatic. He's very, he's more like Shakespearean. He's funny, witty, cute, but then he's serious and he's blowing everything up. And I truthfully have not seen much of it. I'll be working on it. Paul McGann, the TV movie was terrible. Paul McGann himself wasn't a terrible Doctor. Again, I really wish we could have seen more with him. Maybe in the future. I definitely would love to get a show on the Time War, just on the Time War, and then have it continue on from there. That'd be a cute little mini-series. Mini-series would be great. Basically, then we go to Eccleston. And then I skipped over the black and white era for a reason. The black and white era, now, I'm not too adept on the black and white era. Hartnell and Troughton. However, I've watched a couple Hartnell serials, and I watched 2 Petra Troughton serials, the Tomb of the Cybermen and the Mind Robber, which are 2 of the 5 now that they're actually full serials. Most of Patrick Troughton's serials, they lost episodes. BBC had a junking policy, and therefore you lose almost all of the old episodes. For example, there's a famous scene in which the Doctor regenerates for the first time, and they still have a very crappy scene of it, but they don't have the entire episode, the last episode of that serial. So they're finding more episodes as we go on, and they're actually starting to make animation because they have all the audio. So I really, really want to see more of the animation ones. Maybe, hopefully in some time, we have hope. They probably never will find the episodes, but we do have that, we cling on to the hope. Because as you go into random countries, I think in Argentina they found one, or something like that. It's not down in that, I think it was Argentina. So it's very interesting. Moving on, we go to Star Trek. Now, Doctor Who started in 1963. Star Trek was 1967, 8, and 9. So Star Trek actually was after Doctor Who. A lot of people go, oh, the Borg, they're kind of like a Cybermen. The Cybermen ripped off the Borg. Actually, the Borg weren't until the 80s, and Cybermen were in the 60s, early 60s. They were some of the first villains. So, interesting tidbit. Star Trek. I am only a fan of the original series. I've seen a couple episodes of The Next Generation, and I haven't seen it yet. But I bought Deep Space Nine. I bought it at a flea market for $15. I haven't actually had the time to sit down and watch it yet. But the original series, the reason I love it is it really focuses on the bonding of the crew. It's very good story-driven among everybody. It's not just, this mission, this mission, this mission. It has the perfect amount of, it's got a little comedic sense. George Takei is always interesting to watch, no matter who you are. Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner have such a good bonding in the show. They go so well together. And then my personal favorite character, you have Leonard McCoy. DeForest Kelly is just hysterical. Every word that comes out of his mouth, it's hysterical. I love him. He's my favorite. Even in the new Star Trek movies, Carl Urban did a great job as DeForest Kelly's McCoy Bones. He did a great job. So one of my favorite roles. He very nice, very good role. Scotty is great. James Doohan. Unfortunately, my two favorite characters, Bones and Scotty, the actors are both dead. They were great in the show. James Doohan and DeForest Kelley really, really cared about it. They went to conventions often. They're great people. Even Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura. Star Trek, one of the things, the first interracial TV kiss was between Lieutenant Uhura and, Captain Kirk. So you had William Shatner and Nichelle Nichols. William Shatner was actually messed up on purpose in the scene when he kissed a white woman, so they'd have to use the scene when he kissed Uhura. He wanted to set that landmark, so another little Star Trek thing. I think with Star Trek that most people don't remember with the original series that made it so cool is at the time in the late 60s you had the Cold War, you had all these things. Now you have a Russian, an American, a black woman, and she's black. You have an alien. Now, a lot of people, kind of question this. You have a potential gay couple, arguable, between Spock and Kirk. Some people, Gene Roddenberry actually came out and said he designed it to be like a couple in Greek mythology. And if you know anything about Greek mythology, he basically implied he wrote them to be together. However, he also said, well, if you don't want them to be together, they're not together. So really, it's really a take it as you go. I'm indifferent. So you have all these different types of things. You have Sulu, who's Asian. And we're coming, World War II, there's still kind of like a stereotype on Japanese people. And we're showing that we can get this far. We can go into space. We can go to other planets. We can build these ships with all these different types of people working together. And in the future, we will all work together. And it really, really was a controversial, but it really set a good, feeling out there for everybody. And a lot of people don't realize that, but that's interesting. Whereas Next Generation, it was the recycled formula that they could use. A lot of people prefer the Next Generation, and I understand why. It's really good effects. The stories are very much improved. I just cannot... There's just a certain guilty pleasure among Star Trek in that, the cheesy acting from William Shatner and the cheesy effects. But, I like William Shatner's acting. I actually find it enjoyable. Yes, maybe a little over the top, but I love it. I love older sci-fi. He was almost everybody in the Star Trek cast was actually on the Twilight Zone. You had George Takei, James Doohan, William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy. I don't know if Nichelle Nichols was, and I don't know. I don't think Walter Koenig was, but I'd have to look it up. So it's interesting. Those Star Wars I had mentioned before. I love Star Wars. I actually got into it in 2002 when the Attack of the Clones came out, and that's what got me into it as a kid when they did the prequels. Then in 2005, I was ecstatic to see the third one. But after watching Attack of the Clones, I had watched the originals, and I liked them. But I was like, oh, like Attack of the Clones. And then I watched the new one. And then now that I'm older, I have such a respect for the originals. Some people like the prequels more, and I'm sorry for them. No, the prequels are okay. A lot of people hate them. I don't hate them. There's only two things I feel they could have done better. Anakin Skywalker, they basically needed to replace Hayden Christensen. Hayden Christensen was a terrible actor. He couldn't take it. He's what ruined the prequels for me. But mainly, George Lucas, he was good. Don't boo me off the stage yet. But he's terrible, terrible writer. He shouldn't screenwrite anything. In his old age, he's gotten terrible. Don't believe me, we have the Star Wars prequels. We have Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And what else has he done? Is that what? Nothing? Okay. So yeah, he hasn't done much. So really, he's sorry, George. Luckily for the new Star Wars movie, he's creative consultant, which creative consultant basically means, hey George, how you doing? Have a good day, bye, when he walks on set. So I'm interested to see how the new movies are going to turn out. I'll make a whole other video at that at one point in time as we get closer. But the originals, again, I love. The prequels, the screenwriting, like I said, was just... my favorite quote is, "From my point of view, the Jedi are the ones that are evil." Ewan McGregor, who played Obi-Wan, was hysterical. I loved him. He makes him so much fun just to go back and watch, especially when you hit the second movie. He's funny, but then when you get to the third movie, he's like laugh out loud hilarious. And he's just so good in the role. So he's definitely what made it worth it for me. Those are my three favorite. I mean, those are the three big, the three big ones in, teenagers in the modern day century, 21st century. But I mean, there's other ones. Battlestar Galactica I can talk about later on. I'm actually watching an early 80s, I believe it was 1983 show called V. There was V, the Final Battle. Those were two miniseries, and then there was another show, V, the series. They're all the same story, but it was one miniseries, a sequel miniseries, and then a sequel show that came out. And I finished the two miniseries, and I'm like a third. I'm actually only like 4 episodes into the show right now, so it's good. It's kind of cheesy. It's early 80s, and if you know 80s horror, 80s sci-fi, it's really, I like it. But I mean, it's 60s had a feel, the 70s had a feel, and the 80s had the cheapest feel as far as low budget effects. But I mean, they tried. Like, it was like low budget effects in the sense where they tried to make it look realistic, but it didn't at all. But you could tell there was still animatronics, and it was still like actual makeup, and it wasn't just CGI, which is nice. You could see the strings on the ships, which I love, because I mean, it's so much more effort to actually take a person, put him in a costume. Like, my favorite scene is in the Star Wars, the original, in 1977 in the Cantina, when you see all the aliens. Those are all animatronics versus just CGIing something. So I mean, but that's basically it for Geek Week thus far. We'll see if I make time for another video. That Geek Review's out.